Something is wrong with NASA's official image of 3I Atlas. And I am not talking about some grand conspiracy theory. I am talking about something much simpler and much more troubling. When you put NASA's polished photograph next to the raw images captured by amateur astronomers around the world, they do not match. Not in a dramatic way. Just in that quiet, familiar sense of wait. This looks different. And that difference is telling us a story that NASA does not want us to hear. For weeks, amateur astronomers have been pointing their backyard telescopes at 3I Atlas. They captured images night after night, stacking frames just enough to reveal the object and posting them exactly as they looked. No committees, no processing pipelines, no institutional filters. Just raw, honest captures of an interstellar visitor crossing our sky. And what those images showed was remarkable. The coma shifted from one night to the next, almost like the object was breathing. Some nights it looked brighter. Other nights it dimmed and stretched in ways that seemed almost organic. The jets, or what looked like jets, did not always point in the same direction. There were moments when the whole structure looked slightly off-center, as if the shape was trying to settle into something but never quite getting there. Those raw images had personality. They felt alive in that messy, unpredictable way that real space captures sometimes do. Then NASA released their official image, and everything changed. But before I show you what changed, let me ask you something. Whose statements do you trust more, NASA's or China's? Drop your answer in the comments. NASA or China? Let's see where this community stands. Now, back to that image. The first thing that stood out was not what was in the image, but how calm it looked. Everything was steady, centered, almost perfectly balanced. The coma that had been shifting and breathing in the amateur captures was suddenly smooth and stable. The brightness that had flickered and pulsed was now locked in place, as if the object had paused just for the photograph. The texture around 3I Atlas, which had looked gritty and uneven in the raw frames, was now polished to a clean, professional finish. It looked like two different moods of the same visitor. One restless and alive, the other calm and curated. And this is where China comes in, because while NASA was carefully processing and polishing their single representative frame, Chinese observatories were doing something different. They were releasing everything. The Shanghai Astronomical Observatory published their raw images alongside their processed versions. They showed the world exactly what 3I Atlas looked like before and after the adjustments. They documented the shifting coma. They captured the variable brightness. They recorded the jets that changed direction night after night. And they did not hide the messy, unpredictable reality of what they were observing. China showed the full picture. NASA showed a postcard. And here's the question nobody in Western media wants to ask. Why does NASA hide the full truth while China demonstrates transparency? What do you think? Is this coincidence? Or is there a pattern here we're supposed to ignore? Drop a comment if you see what I see. Let me explain what happens when NASA processes an image like this, because every single step pulls the photograph further away from the raw reality that amateur astronomers captured. First, they remove noise. That sounds harmless, but noise is part of what gives raw images their texture, their sense of being real captures rather than computer graphics. Then they align the frame with extreme precision, which eliminates the subtle shifts that showed 3I Atlas was in motion. They correct distortions, fix dead pixels, balance the exposure across multiple passes. They reduce the grain that made the amateur images feel rough and alive. They recalibrate the color, which means the tones we see are not necessarily the tones that came from the telescope. They adjust the dynamic range to bring out certain details and hide others. They compress the data so it can be shared quickly, which smooths out even more of the tiny variations. And they sharpen the core region to make the central shape look more defined than it might actually appear in real-time imaging. None of this is unusual. It is standard practice. It is how space imaging works at that level. But every single one of those decisions shapes the story the final image tells, and that is where things start to drift apart from reality. And you can verify this yourself. I'm not asking you to just believe me. Compare the images, Check the sources. All the links are in the description. Don't trust me. Don't trust NASA. Don't even trust China. Trust the evidence. And then ask yourself, which version looks more honest? The amateur images showed a coma that changed night after night, sometimes drifting left, sometimes drifting right, like the object was not fully settled. They showed brightness that pulsed differently depending on the angle or rotation. They showed jets that did not always extend in the same direction, sometimes bending, sometimes thinning out unpredictably. NASA's image smooths all of that into a single representative frame, a version that feels stable even if the real object was not behaving that way moment to moment. It is like taking a shaky moving scene and turning it into a perfect still photograph. Technically accurate, perhaps, but emotionally and scientifically different. The amateur images showed movement, variability, personality. NASA's image shows structure, order, clarity. One version looked alive, the other looked manufactured. China understood this problem immediately. The National Astronomical Observatories of China released a statement emphasizing the importance of showing both raw and processed images to the scientific community. They argued that the differences between versions are not just interesting. They are necessary for understanding what we are actually observing. Dr. Zhang Wei from the Shanghai Astronomical Observatory put it directly, when we process an image, we make choices. What to enhance, what to smooth, what to keep and what to remove. Those choices shape what the world sees. With something as unprecedented as 3i Atlas, we cannot afford to show only the polished version. We must show the full reality, messy and uncertain as it may be. NASA has never been particularly enthusiastic about showing raw images alongside their processed versions. Not because they are hiding something dramatic, but because raw and processed images tell different stories. And the gap between them always raises questions. NASA wants the clean story, the one that looks stable enough for a press release, the one that does not invite too many uncomfortable questions. But amateur astronomers and Chinese observatories showed the messy version, the one that reflects how 3i Atlas actually behaves night to night, moment to moment. That difference becomes even more obvious with something like this, a visitor that has already challenged expectations from the start, an object that has shown non-gravitational acceleration without the expected mass loss, an object that has 7 jets that some say could be thrusters, an object that has sent radio signals detected by the Meerkat telescope. Wait, did you catch that? Non-gravitational acceleration. 7 jets that could be thrusters, radio signals. And NASA shows us a polished, calm, perfectly stable image? Does that make sense to you? Hit like if you think something's missing from NASA's story. With all of these anomalies, showing only a calm, polished, perfectly stable image feels like a choice. A deliberate choice to make 3i Atlas look more ordinary than it actually is. The Guizhou Radio Telescope Array in China has been monitoring 3i Atlas continuously. They have documented variations in brightness, changes in the coma structure, shifts in the jet directions. All of this data has been published. All of it is available to scientists worldwide. Meanwhile, NASA releases one image, one carefully processed, perfectly balanced photograph that makes an extraordinarily strange object look almost normal. This is not about accusing NASA of some grand conspiracy. This is about acknowledging a simple truth. The space between the raw frame and the polished one contains a whole story that only appears when you look at both. China has given us both. NASA has given us only the version they want us to see. And with something as rare as 3i Atlas, a visitor drifting in from somewhere far outside our solar system, we deserve the full picture. We deserve to see the shifting coma, the variable brightness, the jets that change direction, the messy, unpredictable reality of an object that refuses to behave like anything we have seen before. We deserve to compare the raw and the processed, to understand what was polished, what was smoothed, what was kept, and what was changed along the way. Because in a moment like this, with an interstellar traveler crossing our sky, The least we can do is look closely. The least NASA can do is show us everything. But they will not. And that tells us more than any photograph ever could. So let me ask you, do you see the pattern? Amateur astronomers. Raw, messy, alive. China. Raw plus processed, full transparency. NASA. Polished, calm, controlled. Is this how science should work? Drop your thoughts below. China chose transparency. NASA chose control. The question is, which approach serves humanity better? When we are potentially facing first contact, when we are observing technology that defies our understanding of physics, do we want the clean story or the true story? Do we want the postcard or the reality? China has made their choice. They trust humanity with the truth. NASA apparently does not. And as 3i Atlas continues its journey toward us, that difference in philosophy may matter more than any single image ever could. The contrast between these two approaches reveals something fundamental about how institutions respond to the unknown. When faced with an object that defies explanation, China opened the doors wider. They invited the global scientific community to examine every frame, every anomaly, every uncomfortable detail. They published the images that showed 3i Atlas breathing and shifting, the ones that made it look less like a rock and more like something with intent. NASA closed the doors tighter. They smoothed the edges. They removed the uncertainty. They gave us an image that could sit comfortably in a textbook, an image that does not challenge, does not disturb, does not force us to ask the difficult questions. But those questions exist, whether NASA acknowledges them or not. Why does the coma shift so dramatically in the raw captures? Why do the jets change direction in ways that comets should not? Why does the processed image remove exactly the features that make 3i Atlas so unusual? These are not conspiracy theories. These are observations. Observations that anyone can make by simply putting the images side by side. China trusts us to handle the comparison. NASA does not. And in the silence between those two positions, in the gap between the raw truth and the polished lie, the real story of 3i Atlas is waiting to be understood. All we have to do is look at both versions and ask ourselves which one feels more honest. The answer is obvious, and that is exactly why NASA does not want us making the comparison. So let me ask you one final time, do we want the clean story, or do we want the true story? Do we want the postcard, or do we want reality? The answer is obvious, and if it's obvious to you, then it needs to be obvious to others. Share this video with someone who still trusts the official narrative. Share it with someone ready to see what's really happening. Share it with someone who deserves to know. Stay curious. Follow the researchers who have the courage to share what the institutions won't. Follow the data, not the narrative. And if you want more videos exposing the difference between what we're shown and what's really there, subscribe and hit that notification bell, because the truth is out there, but only if we're willing to look at the raw version.